for the president to speak in the House chamber. The president telling reporters Wednesday afternoon,
she doesn't want to hear the truth, and she doesn't want to hear, more importantly, the American people hear the truth.
Speaker Pelosi with her own late-night tweet saying she hopes the president will support a vote in the Senate Thursday on a House-passed spending bill that would reopen the government temporarily, but one that does not contain border wall funding. The Senate will also vote on a compromise the president has suggested. The shutdown now reaches day 34 in Washington. The latest Fox News poll finds support for building the wall is up slightly.
We just asked about the wall back in September and found 39% were in favor of building the wall along the southern border. Now, after this stalemate, we find that it's up a couple of points, 4 points. Now 43% favor building the wall, 51% oppose it.
Fox News Director of Polling Dana Blanton says 51% of those polled find the president is responsible for the shutdown. As the administration prepares to release its plan for Middle East peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tells Fox's The Story with Martha McCallum he's optimistic about it.
It seems to me that we're at a point in time where there are ways that we can resolve the primary differences and encourage those two places, the Israelis and the Palestinians, to come together to resolve their differences and get a solution there that has bedeviled the world for an awfully long time.
And Secretary Pompeo says despite the planned withdrawal of U.S. forces from Syria, the U.S. will remain engaged in the Middle East. This is Fox News.
Hi, welcome to this Subway ad for our all-new Ultimate Cheesy Garlic Bread. How would you like it?
I'll take a skeptical grandma.
Set in her ways?
A smidge.
Grandma, try this Ultimate Meatball Marinara made with Ultimate Cheesy Garlic Bread. Melted mozzarella, Parmesan, garlic butter spread. It's just like yours.
Like mine? My grandmother's recipe?
Try it.
You know, my grandmother's cheesy garlic bread was never all that.
Subway, make it what you want. Limited time only at participating restaurants.
Are you not getting paid what you're worth? Or not reaching your full potential at your job? If you're pioneering, adventurous, competitive, love talking to people, and want to earn $100,000 per year, sell cars on U.S. military bases with Military Auto Source. Start on Guam, stay on Guam, or move to Japan or Korea. To see if you qualify, visit maseastasiarecruiting.com. Military Auto Source, helping you reach your full potential.
Opinion.
Police in Sebring, Florida, are still trying to determine the motive for a shooting spree at a bank there on Wednesday. Police Chief Carl Hoagland says they responded after a man called them from inside the bank to say he'd opened fire.
While engaged in negotiations, I ordered or asked the sheriff to send in the tactical unit or their SWAT team in an attempt to recover potential victims and take the subject into custody. After an assessment of the scene, we're sorry to learn that we have at least 5 victims, people who were senselessly murdered as a result of his act in this bank.
The suspect, 21-year-old Zephan Zaver, later surrendered to police. The U.S., Canada, several Latin American countries formally recognizing Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido as that country's new interim president, but incumbent president Nicolas Maduro refusing to cede power. He has ordered U.S. diplomats to leave Venezuela by this weekend. 7 people reported dead in clashes with forces supporting Maduro on Wednesday. There's a new team of lawyers representing disgraced movie producer Harvey Weinstein.
The embattled producer has hired a new defense team that includes an attorney who most recently represented Rose McGowan, one of Weinstein's original accusers. Jose Baez represented McGowan, who pleaded no contest to drug possession charges last year. McGowan originally claimed Weinstein had the drugs planted in her wallet in 2017. Baez joins Ron Sullivan and Pam Mackey as replacements for Ben Brafman on Weinstein's criminal assault case in Manhattan. Weinstein is slated to go on trial May 7th on 5 counts of sexual assault. Michelle Polino, Fox News.
Stopping for coffee in Berkeley, California will soon cost you more unless you bring your own reusable cup. City Council there voting unanimously to impose a 25-cent fee for requesting a disposable cup. Cup law takes effect a year from now. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Cheers to 80 years. It's our 80th anniversary and the gifts are on us. 80 gift certificates, 8 shopping sprees, 8 staycations, and 1 round trip flyaway for 2 to Manila. So how do you enter? Calvo's Insurance personal home and auto customers are automatically entered. Non-Calvo's customers may enter by receiving a qualified quote. It's our way of saying thank you for trusting us for the past 80 years. For more details, visit calvos.com/giveaway or call 472-6816. Calvo's Insurance, serving Guam for 80 years.
Docomo Pacific is making the Better Together bundle even better. 2 great services plus more. Get unlimited local calls, SMS, and 20 gigs of data, plus unlimited home internet for $109 a month. Sign up today and get free installation and choose between a free Galaxy S8, S8 Plus, or $100 off select devices. Mobile plus online from Docomo Pacific. Better together. Some conditions apply. See store for details.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie. And now, sitting in for the vacationing Bob Klitzkie, here's Daryl Taggarty.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to the January 24th edition of Tall Tales. Bob Klitzkie is on vacation, and he will be back in 42 days. That's the countdown. 42 days. He will be back in this chair as host, so do stay tuned. But in the meantime, I'm Daryl Taggarty, and I'll be with you until 6 o'clock this evening, and we'll have Tall Tales for you today. Let's see. We need to look at something that has to do with the Second Amendment. And before we do other elements of the show, let's take a look at this article that appeared, Bearing Arms website. Tom Knighton, the author of this piece called New Orleans Buyback Effort Marred by Stupidity. A lot of football fans are giving the city of New Orleans their sympathies right now after the NFC Championship game loss. A controversial no call seemingly gave the game to the Rams. After all, and a lot of people are hating that for the Big Easy. But New Orleans has other problems far bigger than a football game. It's a violent city with a sky-high violent crime rate, after all. With the Democrats in firm control of the city, it's unsurprising they blame guns for the problem. Like a lot of Democratic enclaves, they decided to host a gun buyback program to try to get guns off the street. It did not go well. LaToya Cantrell's gun buyback turned out to be a bust. Previously unmentioned, this painfully liberal effort only had $100,000 total, so only money for 200 people. Small, important details such as this had not been shared. The Hayride, a publication, jumped on the fact Cantrell originally said $500 per gun. Then it was modified to $500 maximum per resident, no matter if they turned in 1 or 5 guns. As to how it worked, they gave vouchers for guns. The buyback was advertised as cash, although one person said he received a $500 card for a store named Dollar General. It's still unclear if anyone received actual cash. First, a $500 gift card to Dollar General? Seriously? It's like giving away a car only for it to be a Yugo. Second, $500 per gun is hilarious. You see? Gun buybacks have to walk this odd line between offering enough to entice people to turn in their guns and not so much that they will go out and get guns just to turn in. A $500 buyback would encourage me to go out and pick up a High Point or other inexpensive pistol and then take that money to drop on something else. And that's the problem. About the only way to avoid that is to offer market value for each weapon. Unfortunately, for buyback proponents, that's not something they're really in any place to try and do. They don't know market value, for one thing. For another, market value may not be enough to get people to turn in their weapons. And this is a government program. Of course, the Cantrell camp figured out the problem with the plan and adjusted, offering just $500 total, regardless of how many guns people turned in, which most likely resulted in fewer guns being turned in. After all, if you're going to give me $500 regardless, you're going to get the one I'm least attached to, and I'll keep the rest. Frankly, from what I can see, the author of the piece, this is a train wreck even by buyback standards. Most buybacks are at least organized. They may pay for really stupid things they're counting as guns, but at least they're organized enough to have their stuff together before the beginning of the event. Cantrell managed to botch even that part. Yet these people want to be taken seriously when they talk about the problems plaguing the city. They want to pretend it's the number of guns on the street that's the problem. Why should you listen to any of them? They can't even pull off a buyback. The process is simple. They give you guns, you give them money. There have been enough completed that someone should have been able to use Google to see what to do. If they can't get that right, only a fool would believe they're right on much of anything else. It's a good article, not only because of the topic, but also the point that he makes is that if you, as a public official, make a plan and the plan doesn't work for obvious reasons, it just shows that you're not thinking through the plan, and it shows how good your planning is and how insistent you are that you are right, regardless of how good your plan is or how good your, maybe it's a reflection of how good your staff is. And that's really a lesson we have before us right now with the new administration. I'm not citing any particular examples, but you know, this is kind of the honeymoon phase, isn't it? We're still waiting to see how well things go. And they're not going to talk about it themselves. I don't expect representatives of Governor Leon Guerrero to call up and admit to shortcomings on the 24th of January. It's the part of the media, the press, to dig these details out and share them with us, the public. Already, we have a caller. Thank you very much. Let's go to the phone lines. Welcome to The Point, Too Tall Tales. Hello?
Daryl, you there?
Yes, I am. Are you there?
Yeah, I am, Daryl. This is Bob. I just wanted to make a couple of comments about the whole buyback program.
Mm-hmm.
Where does the government get the money? And I guess it's kind of a question of the comment, but where does the government get the money to buy back the weapons from?
Oh, it's taxpayer dollars.
Exactly. They're taxpayer dollars. So we're actually taking, so let's take that $100,000 and throw it in a fire, or better yet, we'll just give it away, because that's what they're doing is giving it to somebody, because the theory is that the weapons that they do bring back, they're going to destroy them.
Right.
We just gave the money away for a useless cause, which anytime the government has tried to do a buyback, whether it be here, we tried to do it a couple of times in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the comment in the article about whatever they deemed was a weapon was given cash for, and it does not reduce the number of or the amount of violence. It just, those that are desperate enough or smart enough, like the writer had said, that you'll buy a cheap weapon and turn it in for even more cash back.
Yeah, I think it was done here on Guam even after World War II. There were a lot of guns laying around, and so I remember my grandmother that there was some talk about down at the ranch there was one of those grease guns, a 45 caliber automatic that was buried in oiled rags underneath the shack, and that with enough ammunition to do what you needed to do. I never saw it, but they were pretty serious about it. And I think that we were, the community was approached by the Guam police asking for everyone to turn in weapons. And there was some kind of a cash award given for that. But only people who want to turn in weapons are going to turn them in. It's the ones who want to keep them for whatever reason, especially if they were already traced back to some crime. They don't want to turn them in, have their name attached to it, and have them do a ballistics test and then trace it back to the seller. You know, that's not going to happen.
So why is it so difficult for the anti-gun folks to understand that buyback programs don't work in the long run?
Well, as Bob has pointed out, Bob Klitzkie has pointed out a number of times, there are people who think that the solution to problems is a program and throw money at it and hire staff and then have that as being the solution, regardless of the results. I'm not a fan of the calculating effort by input. I'd like to see the calculation of the value effort by the results. And so here's clearly an example where the results don't bear any relation to the amount of effort that was made to get the guns off the New Orleans streets.
But that's all I wanted to talk about a little bit there, Daryl.
Well, thank you so much for the call, Bob. Call again sometime, anytime. Okay?
I will.
Okay, thanks again. Okay, that was Bob, and yeah, you know, some people have experience with these buyback programs in other communities, and so that's why I wanted to bring this up. Our host on hiatus suggested that I take a look through some of these articles and pull out something that tickled my fancy. So there we go for today. Let's see. I'm still trying to pull up on my computer. We already have some folks on, I can see, and are tuned in and making comments. And let's see who's tuned in already. We've got Tom Van Engen and Ken Leon Guerrero and let's see, Jack Haddig already making comments. If you would like to call, you can call us at 888-8255 and let us know what's on your mind. Also, you can find us on Facebook, and of course, you can find us on 93.3 on FM. And we will continue. Let's take a look at Zami Ikatni for today. Today, I'm not even going to mention, I'm not even going to read to you the PDN editorial because it's again from USA Today and the shutdown. So if you really need to know about the editorial stance of USA Today, then of course you can do so by picking up a copy of Pacific Daily News, but it's not going to help you understand your community any better. I'm disappointed, but I have some more to say about this. For the PDN to talk about the shutdown of parts of the federal government through somebody else's words is, you're just not applying yourself. Why does the PDN not tell us about the impact on federal employees and services on Guam and in the region? What about the role of the air traffic controllers and Border Patrol and TSA agents who are keeping our tourists coming? If they all just walked away, the airport would be closed down. Nobody would come and go. That's the shutdown. And of course, there's been a bill passed that everyone's going to get paid afterwards. But there are people who are locked out of their jobs. And the people who are showing up for work are not collecting a paycheck, so they're living on whatever savings they have or credit cards they have or the generosity of others. And that's a hell of a way to run a railroad. And we should offer, or the PDN should be offering kudos to others who are still working, besides air traffic controllers, Border Patrol, and TSA agents. You got the United States Coast Guard is still out there working. The National Weather Service is still on here on Guam. In the States, it's off. You have to go to alternate weathermen who work for leading newspapers and whatnot to get the weather forecast for the area. They're not coming out of the National Weather Service. And the National Park Service. Some of our parks are open, the federal parks. And, you know, good on them for continuing to provide the services that federal tax dollars pay for and have been established as a service by policy. Which offices are completely closed? They could be talking about that instead of running a USA Today editorial. Which local federal offices are completely closed? Like there was a story about the, and I don't think it was a story, I think it was somebody writing in, or a couple of people writing in about how the Retidian Fish and Wildlife Service reserve, wildlife preserve, is closed to the public. Now, I understand PDN is a profit-making franchisee of national media brand Gannett, and they may be restrained by their format or required to promote USA Today. But it is abdicating relevancy, local relevancy, to its competitor in this market and dumbing down its customer readers. This, you know, there's plenty of ways to get the national news without taking up space in the local rag for national news in the local editorial block. So, no love for you today, PDN, and for your editorial. And also, let me grab the paper here. Let me pull away from the microphone here. Part of the editorial function of a newspaper is to decide what's going to be on the front page. And I was aghast when I opened the paper this morning and saw a picture without a story. The picture is by Rick Cruz. And there's a title on the picture saying, "Keeping Island Safe." And here's the caption. Deputy Fire Chief Joey Nicholas left explains how urgent calls are handled to Governor Lou Leon Guerrero and Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio as the island leaders stop in at the 911 dispatch center located within the Guam Homeland Security Office of Civil Defense facility in Agana Heights on Wednesday. So you see these. It's a picture, keyboard, and some card files, some flip files, and a whiteboard, and a chair. Well, you know, basically we're talking about a telephone and some people who are there to answer the telephone, like a dispatch office. But it's 911. It's not calling your precinct. It's not calling the fire department directly. 911 will get you to the fire department directly, and then they'll notify the nearest fire station to respond. Yes, we understand that. But that's not what a 911 system is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be manual. It's supposed to be able to collect evidence to be used in a subsequent criminal action or civil action. It's official records. Recordings, that's why it's important to have the recordings. Even in this day and age, have the capacity to receive pictures or text from a cell phone. But no, it's a voice. It's voice only. It's so outdated. And keeping islands safe should be making excuses why we're not keeping islands safe. Should be the actual headline on the front page of today's PDN. I just, and everyone in the room knows it, and that facility is immediately next door to Government House. It's part of the incident command structure. If there were to be, God forbid, another airliner going down somewhere on its approach or after takeoff, 911 would be the place where the calls would come in. But one at a time by voice, really? Good luck. If there was a weapons of mass destruction event, well, 911 is right there in the same building as Homeland Security and Civil Defense. So somebody would have to run down the hall and tell somebody in another agency. It's not totally automated. How about a call coming from on base? It goes to an on-base 911. It doesn't go to Guam Police. Or a federally connected person off base calls 911. And the 911 operator has to find a way to get that information over to the federal law enforcement and investigative offices and duty officers. There's so much more to a 911 system than just picking up the phone and saying, 911, what's your problem? And so maybe in coming days I'll bring in the specifications for a 911 system, an NG, now it's NG 911 system, the one that they're going out to buy as soon as they can actually post money for it because it's been returned. As I said, we're going to come back to this. Okay, that was the PDN today. And as long as I think that they're substandard, I'm going to keep kicking right here on Tall Tales, because that's kind of what they deserve. Now, the Guam Post editorial today is entitled, Washington Chokes Guam's Main Labor Pipeline Without Truly Understanding the Island's Needs. Really? Are we a mystery to the feds? Really? The Philippines is to Guam what Mexico is to California. Quote, said John Robertson, president of Am Orient Engineering and an official in the Guam Contractors Association. The editorial continues, Robertson is spot on. Can you imagine California without Mexican workers? Can you imagine Guam without Filipino workers building houses, fixing roads, and toiling in the sun all day, building infrastructure concrete block by concrete block? Robertson made the comment Tuesday, referring to Guam's more than 70-year history of bringing in workers from the Philippines since the U.S. military's reconstruction on Guam following World War II. Historically, local worker numbers haven't met Guam's need for a mass of workers committed to work day after day doing field construction work. The job tests the stamina of even the most willing workers. Hours of work in the sun could suddenly turn into being deep in mud in a sudden downpour. It's backbreaking work many Guamanians opt not to do because they have other, more comfortable job choices. Guam's ties to the Philippine labor market also became crucial during the hotel construction boom on Guam between the 1980s and 1990s. And now that Guam is in the midst of another military buildup, with the Department of Defense's development of a Marine Corps base, in addition to the Air Force and Navy bases that have been here for a long time, more workers from the Philippines are being brought in, and more are expected to be brought in. I will comment. Let's just go through the whole editorial first. As the military projects begin to ramp up the civilian sector, from small contractor building houses to government of Guam contractors building local infrastructure, has found that skilled local workers are getting tougher to find. Construction projects from building homes to adding an arrivals corridor at the international airport to infrastructure projects of the local government have been delayed and are facing cost overruns. No. For decades, Guam's ability to tap into the Philippine labor market has been unimpeded until recently. So let's go ahead and take a break here, and I will come back with Zami Ikatni and today's Guam Daily Post editorial here on Tall Tales.
John Gibson, digging up history. If it were not for two friends who gathered up lost copies of all his works, the plays and sonnets of this famous playwright would have been lost forever. That story after this. Let's talk heirloom sheets and towels from Redland Cotton in Alabama. First, the family farm, growing the finest cotton in the world. The spinning, the looming, every step made in America, right down to the cutting and sewing. Sheets designed from a long-lost 1920s weave. The softest, most comfortable, longest-lasting sheets you've ever slept on. The Redland family, dedicated to America and linens you'll treasure. Check out redlandcotton.com for America's linen. redlandcotton.com. In his time, he was considered an ordinary playwright. His two friends acted in his plays, watched him develop some of the most famous dramas and comedies in the English language. But the plays and the sonnets were never really published. There were copies the actors used, which they dropped in the trash when the theater moved on to another production. But when the playwright died, his two friends searched out copies of all the plays, convinced another playwright to edit them, and they were all issued in printed copies 7 years after the great man's death. Weirdly, the works of this most famous of all playwrights were never in print until then. We're talking about the works of the bard himself, William Shakespeare. I'm John Gibson, digging up history.
Introducing Exchanged, Guam's first online and mobile remittance to the Philippines. Exchanged is the easiest and fastest way to send money to your family and friends anywhere in the Philippines. Download the Exchanged app or visit their website, exchanged.me. Sign up, remit, and get a chance to win a trip for two to Manila. Deluxe accommodations at the Belmont Hotel at Resorts World Manila. So sign up and remit now at Exchanged. Promo ends March 2nd, 2019. Conditions apply. Also avail of Exchange dollar to remit promo. Visit exchange.me for details.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, sitting in for the vacationing Bob Klitzkie, here's Daryl Taggarty.
Absolutely. Here I am. And just as hot about this issue as I have been since it first came up. Before the break for John Gibson, we were talking about the Guam Post editorial for today. So I was about a third of the way through it. Let's continue. And then I'll make my comments. On January 19, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, in cooperation with the U.S. State Department, announced a seismic shift in policy. It decided to ban Filipino workers from the H-2B visa program for at least a year, based on a finding that as much as 40% of H-2B workers from the Philippines, quote, overstay beyond the period their visa allows them to work in the United States. But there's a big difference between what the national statistics shows and Guam's actual numbers. While a 40% overstay rate is indeed an alarming number, Guam Labor Department data show less than 5% of H-2B workers overstay on the island. Governor Lou Leon Guerrero's administration estimates the rate of overstaying H-2B workers is even lower, between 1% to 2%. Guam's challenge in meeting its construction labor needs in light of the Department of Homeland Security's new ban has reached a, quote, crisis level, the governor has said. The Guam Chamber of Commerce stated, this latest development, quote, could be catastrophic to our economic development, end quote. While some hope that construction projects that can be labeled military-related might be exempt from the ban, many agree this new challenge will create another hardship for the local community. Our island's labor challenge is aggravated by its remoteness. U.S. workers who would normally travel from state to state in the mainland generally aren't drawn to work on Guam, where they're much farther from family and the pay isn't as attractive as the more competitive stateside markets with bigger economies. Guam elected officials must now challenge themselves to make this one of their top priorities. They need to further engage policymakers in Washington, D.C. in discussions with one voice that the new DHS rule squeezes Guam's main labor pipeline and creates a chokehold on the local economy. It's time for Guam's elected leaders to see past the petty issues of the day. Only a united, strong voice can give our island a chance to convince Washington that Guam's situation is different. And to this I say, duh. We're a colony. We're 13 degrees north, 145 degrees east. We're not a state with a voice in national policy. Besides, didn't Guam voters overwhelmingly prefer Hillary in our 2016 elections? We had a straw poll vote, didn't we? Why would they listen to us? After a year has passed since the warning shot, a year or 2 years has passed since the warning shot was fired. A year ago, they delisted a couple places. And they also stopped remember they stopped the approving of H-2 workers for Guam? They just stopped. And the chamber and some other folks got together and sued to try to compel the agency to come up with, to change its methods of approval, or to go ahead and just let them in anyway, or explain themselves. And even the judge agreed with them, with local efforts. And Homeland Security hasn't budged. In fact, the budge has gone the wrong direction. It's gone against us. That's what last Friday's announcement means. That even though we took it to court, to federal court, and the court sided with us, they were not compelled to change their ways. It's not only the H-2B overstay rate, it's also the rejection rate. It's how many scams have been stopped, not approved. How many requests were approved by the Guam Department of Labor that were so thin, flimsy, that there was no local labor was willing to take these jobs. I remember hearing about a few several years ago, and it was embarrassing that they would put these forward. I think they were asking for landscapers. They didn't want to hire landscapers locally. They wanted to hire landscapers out of the Philippines. Now, those rejections count against Guam as a destination and as one of the few places in the United States where the local Department of Labor has a role in certifying the need for the workers. In other places, it's directly with the federal government. But here on Guam, the Department of Labor and I think Guam EPA are both deputized to perform those functions for the federal agency that does the actual approvals, review and approval. Similar to the passport office, Reverend Tax does the intake for passport applications. Similar. And Guam Department of Labor has not acquitted itself well over the years. And so it's really kind of late. Let me go ahead with my comment here. Guam's needs, this is my reaction to reading this editorial. Guam's needs are broader than the silo of history of base construction and suppressing construction costs. We understand the need for foreign skilled workers, but don't understand the failure to cultivate local employment options for our graduating children, for adults seeking to enter or re-enter our workforce, or for immigrants who are admitted by the same national authorities, legally admitted to work and live and enter the United States and live on Guam. I was particularly impressed by the editorial contrasting Filipinos and Guamanians, as if the latter did not include the former. Did the writer intend to contrast Filipinos and Chamorros? I mean, I remember seeing waterworks employees down in the hole finding the pipes, and whether it was fresh water or sewer water, and doing what needs to be done in the hole. Well, that's a government job, not a construction job, not in the hot sun where dry baking job site turns into a muddy mess in a moment. We know that immigrants and grown children of Filipino national origin, or more than a third of the resident population, have succeeded in both professional and trades occupations, and are not the same as the low-wage H-2B workers sought by local employers. We're second generation, third generation already of Filipino immigrants here. Many who came to do these jobs initially for the federal government in construction. In plain fact, a spectrum of workers and skill levels are needed in our developing economy. So far, the national government has exempted build-up contractors from the ban, and odds are that the completed bases may be staffed by the same Okinawan workers currently performing the same duties. Guam's labor market has been distorted for decades for the same reasons cited in this editorial. At the same time, Guamanians joined the military or emigrated to the mainland to seek higher wages and better opportunities. When SRF closed and local civil service work was replaced by a single base operating contractor, Guam's non-Gov Guam middle class was forced to decide whether to follow their jobs or compete here at home for lower wages and lower benefits too. My concern is not with the distortions to the construction market we have enjoyed over the years. If the current U.S. president's agenda is to be credible, Guam is a perfect place to clamp down on companies hiring foreign workers willing to take dirty jobs at depressed wage and benefit levels with marginal occupational safety inspections, so the free market for labor is allowed to set wage and benefit packages. So our free market for labor on Guam is allowed to set the wage and benefit packages. The H-2B program is distorting the Guam labor market to the detriment of the Guam residents, and it has been for 40 years. I'm not talking about the needs of special things like we're going to extend sewer lines, or we're going to have 2 or 3 hotels going up at the same time, or we're going to be building a whole new base. No, I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the regular, around the $300 million of construction activity federally sponsored each year, and about, how much is it, $250,000 or so million dollars a year of investment in civilian side infrastructure and housing. That is the labor market for construction, year in, steady, year in, year out. That's distorted by having chronic reliance on H-2 workers. Perhaps the cost of first-time home ownership and all civilian construction will rise, but they are already subsidized by tax breaks and other incentives. Guam is reminded today of its remoteness and its powerlessness. It is always a challenge when economic baselines are changed, much like raising the minimum wage or designing and implementing universal health insurance. It is time, now it is time, for business owners, managers, and investors to put on their thinking caps and decide for themselves whether their business models and plans need adjusting, or whether they will simply go into another line of business. Such is life. Guam, the island, is not going anywhere, and neither are we. We residents. The buildup will still happen, and we hope tourists will continue to come. What do we have control over? We control how we as a community manage this challenge. With the scores of highly paid and educated public servants managing aspects of public budgets and services, new and younger and female leadership, and lifting of the fog of national government ambiguity. The real challenge is local clarity of purpose, public integrity, and efficient use of available public resources. We need our leaders to work smarter, not harder. Why should we now expect to be given an exemption by the feds for when years the Department of Labor has not faithfully administered the H-2B program? Don't bother asking. Let's grow up and be responsible for our actions. That is what the Guam Daily Post editorial for today has inspired for a response here on Tall Tales. I am just, I'd like to hear if there's somebody out there who's got a problem with what I just said. Please call 888-8255. I'd love to hear your side of it. I remember talking with John Robertson at quite some length about the difficulty of finding labor in this market. And I also understand that once you sign a contract predicated on H-2B workers and you don't get the approvals, then you're forced to go out and have to pay someone more than you put down on the paper. And it's kind of tough. You got to go fill a contract. You got to fulfill a contract, and you're going to lose money on it. Well, you know, that's just, isn't that business? Isn't that how risk is? And we have very, very good businesses on Guam. They can calculate this risk, and now they're just going to have to calculate for different labor rates. That's all there is to it. And the sooner they get on with it, the better. Because labor could be trained if you would just stop thinking that the feds are going to roll over and reverse themselves. Education had better get started fast and not waste time and energy and money, public funds, flying to D.C. to wring your hands and sob and ask for forgiveness for our transgressions, and we'll do better now. And, you know, the people before us didn't know what they were doing, and you know, our housing costs are going to go up and our people are going to be homeless, and no, please. I hope our leaders have more dignity than that. Yeah. Good time for a break. Thank you very much, Real Joe. Let's take a break here and come back with more Tall Tales. 888-8255. Love to hear from you this afternoon.
There's a reason every day a Guam homeowner is getting a solar system installed by Micronesia Renewable Energy. It's because MRE is the most trusted name in solar. With more solar energy solutions than any other solar company on island, homeowners have a choice to go solar for zero money down or take the path to ownership. Whichever way, it keeps our skies blue and your pockets green. And with the most experienced solar technicians and an energy production guarantee, there are no worries. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
Here at Make-A-Wish, our Wish kids wish for all kinds of things. A lot of them involve traveling to faraway places. On Monday, February 18th from 6 until 10, we'll be holding an airlines mileage drive with me, Ray Gibson, on 93.3 The Point, to help us grant these travel wishes. So if you've got spare airline miles, you can donate them without any transfer fees. Your donation will go a long way, and so will our Wish kids.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, sitting in for the vacationing Bob Klitzkie, here's Daryl Taggarty.
Okay, back again with Tall Tales. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And we'll go ahead and let up on the post for a little while. But of course, I'm going to circle back around to this. They should start expecting this from me. Bob Klitzkie was suggesting this yesterday, and I think I'd like this. I'd like to share this with you. How the left gave us, quote, toxic masculinity. Do you know the story of how the left gave us toxic masculinity? Here's an explanation. I think I ought to go through this between now and on our halftime show. Complaints about toxic masculinity often come across as complaints about masculinity. The Gillette ad on the subject shows leering men committing sexual harassment, bullies tormenting those smaller than themselves, and otherwise being obnoxious. But such behavior was always scorned by men of honor. The Gillette ad does show men in their traditional masculine role as protectors, role models, and fathers, though it comes across as feminist and condescending. And he says, I've embedded it below so you can judge for yourself. This was written by Gene Weiss for, where's it? A blog, pathos.com. But there is such a thing as men behaving badly. And this often happens when young boys grow up with no father or father figure to show them how to be a man. A substantial amount of research has shown that boys who grow up without a father often develop hypermasculine traits, that is, extreme physical and sexual aggression. They get in fights and sometimes commit violent crimes. They tend to be misogynistic towards women while also being promiscuous. Girls raised without a father often become hyperfeminine, becoming sexually promiscuous and usually getting pregnant at a young age, generally from one of those hypermasculine men who never stay around to be fathers to their children, much less husbands. Traditionally, marriage civilized men by channeling their sexual desires into a loving relationship and parenthood. And it channeled their aggressiveness into protecting their family and working hard to provide for them. The fathers, in turn, taught their sons how to treat women and how to discipline themselves so they could grow up into effective adults. Who was responsible for mocking these 1950s families and for encouraging young people to rebel against it? Today, marriage has all but disappeared. In the poor working class of all races, and single mothers are raising their children with no father in sight. But middle class and wealthy families, too, are torn by divorce and family dysfunction. And the 60s, with the sexual revolution and the counterculture, threw out all restraints on principle. A consequence of all of this is both the despair among young people, listen to their music, and, quote, toxic masculinity. Chad Felix Green makes the same point in The Federalist publication, blaming the cultural left for tearing down marriage and fatherhood and thus creating the toxic masculinity they now decry. And this is taken from Gillette ad waxes nostalgic about the fathers the left has yanked from boys' lives. Ironically, the concept of young men having confident, positive male role models is a conservative message and has been for a long time. It has been the progressive left and the media that encouraged several generations of young men to indulge their every desire outside of morality or social structures like marriage. Both young men and women have been told for decades to sexually objectify themselves and consider their impulses sacred rights rather than denying themselves through responsible behaviors. The culture has downgraded marriage and the family to, at best, a comic annoyance one grows out of, to, at worst, a repressive and unhealthy, outdated concept that should be rejected. The obsession with celebrating single motherhood as an act of feminist self-determination and a society that views fathers suspiciously as optional caregivers has denied far too many males sufficient role models. An overly sexualized media, combined with an overly violent entertainment culture, has left generations of boys growing up with only TV shows to guide them. Fathers have been largely neglected and are often only celebrated when denouncing masculinity and embracing feminism. While the progressive scoffs at this line of reasoning, and has for a very long time, the truth is everything they lecture us about proper male behavior today, they aggressively shamed out of a society a generation ago. This is simply what happens when the father's authority in family life is denounced, shamed, and cut out altogether. Boys are not lost because of toxic masculinity. They are lost because their fathers have been taken away from them and they cannot figure out how to fill that void with anything but rage and shame. The social change Gillette and progressive activists want, it turns out, is a return to the moral and social values the conservative movement has been shouting from the rooftop for decades. I may be a bit more progressive, too progressive to swallow that whole, but it is something to think about. It really is something to think about, and it may apply to broad swaths of our American society. I'm a father myself, and I have a father, so maybe I am not affected as the people that seem to be affected by that are being referred to in this article. But it's something to think about. And so that's what we're doing here at Tall Tales, giving you something to think about for a Thursday afternoon as we approach 5 o'clock. And so thank you, Bob, for bringing this up. I also wanted to bring up an article I saw in the paper from yesterday about Illinois is about to roll out a pilot program offering patients access to medical marijuana as an alternative to opioids. And medical cannabis dispensaries across the state are getting ready. This is a different way. You know, the United States was not supposed to be 50 identical states or 50 administrative districts. They were supposed to be states where the people of the state set their own culture and priorities and had their own systems so that then other states might see that each one was like a lab. And other states would say, oh, that works well over there, but perhaps we should adopt it over here, that procedure. So when I saw this article, I thought this was a very interesting, that the Illinois Department of Public Health's program allows medical marijuana to be used in place of prescription painkillers. To qualify for the pilot program, patients must be certified by a doctor, and then registration for the program at a dispensary or the local health department only costs $10. And people who qualify for the program must visit a doctor every 90 days in order to renew the certification. And staff at Green Thumb Industries, a Chicago-based medical marijuana provider, are training to learn how to safely transition patients from opioids to medical cannabis. And there are 40 conditions listed where a patient can qualify for medical cannabis. Just, again, something to think about on a Thursday afternoon. And we will continue to bring articles of interest and importance to you. After the top of the hour in our halftime show, I'm going to go into a new element of the program called Bill Watch. And we'll talk about some of the bills that have been introduced in the 35th Guam Legislature, and we'll see if it reflects accurately the quality of the senators that we've just elected in our immediate past election. Here on Tall Tales, we're going on 5 o'clock, time for Fox News, and then we'll be back for another hour of Tall Tales right here on The Point.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 1350 AM, 93.3 FM, and 104.3 HD3.
The State of the Union is postponed. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. President Trump in a late-night tweet saying he'll wait to deliver his State of the Union message until after the partial government shutdown is ended. His decision ends days of back and forth between he and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
The only thing that the two sides can agree on is that what happened is truly unprecedented.
It's a great, great, horrible mark.
The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, broke the news to President Trump that he is not welcome in her House chamber next Tuesday in a letter.
Since government is shut down, we do not. Let's work together on a mutually agreeable date when we can welcome you to the Capitol.
Republicans are calling it a new low for American politics. Democrats say it's simply the right thing to do in the middle of a shutdown.
Fox's Kristen Fisher. The White House had been considering an alternative venue for the speech, but in his tweet, the president says none can compete with the history, tradition, and importance of the House chamber, so he'll wait. The Senate considers two bills Thursday that could end the shutdown. One of them, the compromise the president suggested, border wall funding in exchange for extended DACA protections.
It's hard to think of a good reason to oppose this. But my Democratic friends are trying to come up with something, anything, to justify prolonging the stalemate.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Democrats will push instead for a spending bill that would fund the government until February the 8th.
Reopening the government for 3 weeks may not sound like a long time, but it's massively important to 800,000 public servants who've been languishing without pay.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. The shutdown now reaching 34 days. A gunman walked into a bank in Sebring, Florida Wednesday and started shooting.
A tragic day in our community. We've suffered significant loss at the hands of a senseless criminal doing a senseless crime.
Police Chief Carl Hoagland says 5 people were killed. The suspect eventually surrendered. Why? We don't know yet. This is Fox News.
Are you shopping for a home loan with a low rate and a fast closing? Because that's what you get with a Bank Pacific My Home Loan. All of our loan decisions are made here by people who understand our island. So whether you're buying or building a home or looking to refinance your existing home loan to a lower rate, come see us at Bank Pacific, where we're open to closing your loan in a hurry.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender, credit conditions apply. Viva Bank Pacific.
Docomo Pacific is making the Better Together bundle even better. 2 great services plus more. Get unlimited local calls, SMS, and 20 gigs of data, plus unlimited home internet for $109 a month. Sign up today and get free installation and choose between a free Galaxy S8, S8 Plus, or $100 off select devices. Mobile plus online from Docomo Pacific. Better together. Some conditions apply. See store for details.
Police in Phoenix now believe they know who impregnated an incapacitated woman at a long-term health care facility.
A Maricopa County judge holding 36-year-old Nathan Sutherland at a $500,000 cash bond.
Mr. Sutherland, you're here on 1-count sex assault, a Class 2 felony, 1-count child or vulnerable adult abuse, a Class 2 felony.
Accused of raping an incapacitated woman who gave birth late last month at Hacienda Health in Phoenix. The birth of the baby boy stunned other caregivers and family members. Police linked Sutherland via a DNA match to the baby boy, who's now being cared for by the victim's family. Sutherland is back in court next week. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
The United States formally recognizing opposition leader Juan Guaido as the new interim president of Venezuela.
This is a good day for freedom, and the American people and this president, this administration will continue to stand without apology for freedom and with President Guaido.
Vice President Mike Pence on Trish Regan primetime on the Fox Business Network, but Nicolas Maduro insists he is still Venezuela's leader. So far, he has the backing of that country's military. The U.S. will remain engaged in the Middle East despite the planned withdrawal of U.S. forces in Syria, according to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, telling Fox's The Story with Martha McCallum.
In Syria, President Trump has made a tactical decision. We're going to withdraw our 2,000 uniformed military personnel from that country. But make no mistake about it, the defeat of the caliphate, the ISIS caliphate in Syria is almost complete. We're going to stay there till it's done. This threat from radical Islamic terrorism is a global threat, and America will posture itself in a way to ensure that we're doing all that we can to protect the American people from that threat.
Secretary Pompeo also says he's optimistic about the administration's soon-to-be-released Middle East peace plan. in New York. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Hi, welcome to this Subway ad for our all-new Ultimate Cheesy Garlic Bread. How would you like it?
I'll take a skeptical grandma.
Set in her ways?
A smidge.
Grandma, try this ultimate meatball marinara made with ultimate cheesy garlic bread. Melted mozzarella, Parmesan, garlic butter spread. It's just like yours.
Like mine? My grandmother's recipe?
Try it.
You know, my grandmother's cheesy garlic bread was never all that.
Subway, make it what you want. Limited time only at participating restaurants.
There's a reason every day a Guam homeowner is getting a solar system installed by Micronesia Renewable Energy. It's because MRE is the most trusted name in solar. With more solar energy solutions than any other solar company on island, homeowners have a choice to go solar for zero money down or take the path to ownership. Whichever way, it keeps our skies blue and your pockets green. And with the most experienced solar technicians and an energy production guarantee, there are no worries. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
Yeah. Oh, love those bells ringing. The big bells ringing. And that's our halftime show for today. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll continue with Tall Tales, but always have to have a halftime show. Great halftime show here on The Point, 93.3. Oops. Sorry about that, Real Joe. You know, I'm gonna, some of these things are automatic. I've been saying some frequencies for years, and then, yeah, here I am. It's gonna start bleeding out into our program here. Again, our telephone number, 888-8255. Love to know what's on your mind, having to do with anything we've been talking about here or what might be happening in front of you right now that you'd like to bring to the attention of other listeners. And in the meantime, while we are waiting for your call, I will proceed with an element I call Bill Watch. Not Kill Bill, but Bill Watch. So, you know, this legislature, 35th legislature, and our senators have started filing bills. And you should know what these proposals are. They shed light on where these senators' heads are at, what their priorities are, and how deep they are thinking and how much research they've done. Okay, let's go to the phone first before I go to the bills. And Bill Watch, I've got someone here on line one. Welcome, line one, to Tall Tales.
Hi. How are you doing? This is Tom.
Hello, Tom. Good afternoon.
You know, there's something that I am not happy with the legislature, and if the governor goes through with this, and if the delegate to Washington goes through with it, with what they plan to do, you know that the legislature made a resolution to forward to the governor for a signature, and then they're going to forward it to the delegate to present to Congress to try to exempt Guam from that the law against cockfighting, right?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, and I am not happy with what they did because, to me, they are not speaking for all of us Guamanians here. What if the majority of the Guamanians don't like cockfighting, but yet our elected leaders that we elected them to do what we want them to do for us. They went ahead and made this resolution without having a public hearing, without asking us about it, what do we think about it. There are only a minority of Romanians here like cockfighting.
It is a special interest.
The majority that don't want cockfighting, because I am one of those that believe that killing roosters, having them fight to the death, is immoral. It's against our Christian values, because we were raised up Christians where we should only kill for abstinence. We should only kill animals to eat, not for our enjoyment, not for us to gamble with, not to have
for entertainment. Yeah, for entertainment.
We are forcing those poor roosters to fight to the death. You know, it's bad.
Well, they have a good life until that time. It's almost like having the gladiators at the in Rome fight lions, or bullfighting, or bear fighting. There's been, over the years, there's been many entertainments that have been built around pitting one strong animal, or an animal and a man together, and see how they deal with it in real time. That is it's been banned in all except cockfighting, and now cockfighting has been banned, and now they're trying to draw the line. But it's
it almost seems like the anti-cockfighting people here on the island, it seems like they want to be treated differently from the rest of the United States citizens in the mainland when it comes when it's something that they don't like, but they're always demanding to be treated equally, just like any other United States citizen in the United States of America. But when it comes to something that they want to keep, they want to be treated differently. Because if they're going to force the other United States citizens in the country to comply with that federal law against cockfighting, why shouldn't we also comply with it? Because if we want to be treated equally, we've got to also obey the law equally, just like any other United States citizen.
Well,
asking to be exempted.
In the states have the power under the Constitution to make local law, and you've heard Senator Klitzkie talk about this before, that the national government is overreaching by dictating what should be police powers within a state. But for Guam, actually, we are part of the federal government. We're not part of the national government, and we don't participate in that government. We weren't asked. It was simply it was a measure that was tacked on to a bill that was going out, that was going to be voted and approved, and the proponents of that bill to stop cockfighting in the territories, Guam, Samoa, Puerto Rico. I'm not sure about Virgin Islands, but I know at least the three of the territories are included in the law. And I remember some years back when they passed the law, and they were cracking down on Kentucky, because Kentucky was a big, maybe this is like 30 years ago now, but Kentucky was a big source of the chickens that we were buying out here, purchasing to be brought out to Guam to fight. And there were still businesses in Kentucky that were relying on mail order, and the feds were cracking down on them. We're getting some comments, Tom, on Facebook, and Jason Mesa is saying, it's not about liking cockfighting, it's about culture. And then Nate Horn says, it's not that a majority want cockfighting, it's that D.C. decided for Guam without any input from us. And yeah, those are both valid objections.
But the pro-cockfighting people are got to remember that cockfighting is not part of our culture. It was just introduced to Guam. Just because it's been introduced back during Spanish time, that doesn't mean it's a moral culture. There's no such thing as cockfighting before the Spanish came to Guam. You see what I'm saying? So it has nothing to do. That's a moral culture.
Well,
it was not part of our culture.
There's a large.
Follow through what the Spanish introduced to us, because back then they seemed to like it.
Well, there was a large. There's a large arena up in Dededo, and then every in Guam law, every fiesta is an occasion when cockfighting can happen at a local arena at the village level under the mayor's purview.
Yeah.
How popular are those? How popular are those?
But ever since this law started about cruelty to animals, that's when the anti-cockfighting bill's been introduced, and now it's law.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen any state yet out of the 50 states that are asking to repeal or to do their own law to allow their own cockfighting in the state. It's still illegal in all 50 states, I believe. Right?
Yes, by the law that was recently extended to cover Guam and the territories was an extension of that same law. Because when Congress passes a law, they don't necessarily apply to the territories unless they're specifically mentioned.
Yeah, even if the national government has told 50 states that, okay, we'll allow you to have your own law. If you want to allow cockfighting in your state, so be it. Go ahead and make your own local law. We won't interfere. So, but so far, none of the 50 states has allowed their own cockfighting.
No.
Because everybody feels, at least the majority of the people in America feel that it's cruelty to animals to just let those poor animals fight to the death just for our enjoyment.
Well, it was a political decision by the elected representatives from the congressional districts across the country and the senators who are elected by each of the states. They made that decision not only to ban cockfighting in the 50 states, but now to extend it to the territories. Even though we don't participate at that level, we don't have a vote. We only have participation in committee, and we can, our sole representative can get up and make a speech. But besides that, we do not participate. We are living in a territory that is under the plenary power of Congress, and that is an absolute power to plan for and organize how civilian habitation will be organized in this area. And so that's just kind of the downside of it. Yes, I agree with the comments that came in.
So the objective now is to go ahead and protest this thing just because we're not given a chance to speak up about it.
Well, that goes for just about every law that's passed.
Accept that law whether we like it or not. So that's their. But what gets me though is those senators down there. Every one of them, they raised their right hand and they swore, they affirmed to well and faithfully execute the laws of the United States of America and the laws of Guam. So help them God. But they're going against their swearing now. They are against this law. They're not going to well and faithfully execute the law.
No, and they are actually impaneled by a federal law, the federal law that created the Organic Act. That is the Organic Act that created the legislature, and created the governor, and created the delegate. That's a federal fiction, or it's a federal fact, and it's a revocable fact. And so for our leaders to go decide that they're going to make this travel to D.C. on this one issue is pandering to special interests. And it may be a special cultural interest, and it may be a special participant, cockfighting enthusiast interest. But it is, as you point out, not a majority position. And their accountability as leaders is a political accountability. They're pretty safe now, but if this was just before the elections in 2020, I doubt they would be quite so quick to travel to the states and do a, pass a resolution and go run around and try to present it. Maybe they'll do it in the spring when the weather is nicer, but I don't think anyone's in a real big hurry to get to D.C. at the tail end of January. It's pretty wretched there now.
I will let other people chime in.
Well, thank you.
Listen.
Thank you very much for the call, Tom.
All right, buddy. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, that was our... I've enjoyed talking to Tom over the years. I'm glad that he's calling in. And I understand, from Jason and Nate, who came in on Facebook, I understand that they, what their position is. And I agree that they need to speak up. For both the cultural viewpoint, people have that sensitivity that the culture is being eroded by federal laws that we have no power over, or our way of life on Guam is being eroded by decisions being made in Washington, D.C. I mean, it's the same as the H-2 workers, and before the H-2s we had parolees, and there were large camps. And the same goes with the closing of our airport and seaport to anyone that didn't have the permission of the Secretary of the Navy or his designee, the Commander of Naval Forces Marianas. And we've survived that. We've survived, as a people, we survived the Japanese occupation, the Spanish occupation, and diseases. We've survived the immigration. We've survived emigration, where more of the people, the original native inhabitants of Guam, live off island than live on island. And yes, there are people who need to be active to try to hang on to a way of life that we value. And so but now it's all being played out in a political arena, which is it's like the cockpit, isn't it? And let's see. Jose Martinez says, are we just going to pick and choose which federal laws we protest and which federal laws we accept? Yeah, that's a good point. Which laws do we think are just? Which ones we like? Like, okay, we'll let you go ahead and have H-2 workers. Oh, we like that. Because then we can build house cheap. And we don't worry about those H-2 workers paying $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000 for a chance to get a job on Guam, paying to the employer, and then having to pay for the plane ticket and the food and the lodging that's provided by the employer, and $250 a month for a bunk in a room that has 4 men. A room smaller than the studio with 4 men in it, and the employer's pulling $1,000 a month out of those 4 guys' paychecks. Yeah, we don't bother ourselves with these details, but the feds do, and that's what with the H-2B worker ban for Guam, that's what has gotten us into trouble, because we haven't enforced it. Treated people well when they came here to work, made sure that they had the skills that were needed that we couldn't replicate here on island, and that's kind of where we are these days. Chris Chip on Facebook is saying, cockfighting? What about valid driver's license approved by Department of Homeland Security to enter NBG? Oh, Naval Base Guam. You know, as much money as we pay folks up at Rev and Tax, they really ought to be able to get it together after a year or 2 or 3 on this one issue. Thank you very much, Chris, for that comment. I don't try to go on base, even though I have a first cousin who issues the permits. We just laugh about it when I have to go on. And I go on for some work-related, but otherwise I don't have any business on base. It's beyond the fence. And yes, we ought to have the services in our government agencies that we pay good money for, day in, day out. And if we've got these people who are going to be hanging out for 30 years, we ought to be training them and giving them the capital tools that are needed to improve their productivity. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, he said bingo. You know, we are a well-off society, but we accept mediocrity as some kind of a tropical malaise. It's too damned hot. Yeah. My understanding is that from my grandparents here is that you got to work in the sun. You get up at 4 o'clock, you have your breakfast, and you're out there walking to the fields or to the ranch, and you get there just as it's bright enough to see what you need to do. And you start. And when it gets too hot, like about 10:30, you stop. And you have the sense to get out of the sun, and you rest. And then you go back out about 2:30, and you work until it's just about too dark to see. And then you make your way home. Or you go to the shack and you make yourself an evening meal, and you go to sleep. That's how you work in the tropics. It's not 8 to 5. And aircon. Let's see, Jason Mesa is saying online, but our voices are all bound by our reliance on compact impact funding and all the other federal funding that puts us in the U.S.'s hands. We can and will always stand up, but Uncle Sam will always have the upper hand. And Chris Chip says, you just keep hitting the nail on the head. You know, Jason Mesa's comment about reliance on federal program funds. These program funds are part of a safety net so that we don't have people suffering in the community. They were never meant to be a replacement for having to go out and work. But that's up for our own local leaders to create an environment, a labor market environment that we can all participate in for it locally, where you don't only start work at 8. You can start work at 5 a.m. in the summer, and then in the winter, in the beginning of the dry season, maybe you're going to start work at 6 because that's when it gets light. Yeah, Ken Leon Guerrero says, you would think that after 14 years, Rev Tax could have gotten the Real ID program done. Has it been 14 years that they've had this program? You know, I stopped counting. But certainly there are people within Rev Tax. 14 years would be about half of a 30-year GovGuam career. And they should know. Is it time already for the seventh inning stretch? You know, I used to go to Memorial Stadium in Baltimore back in 81, 82 and watch the Orioles play. And I always liked that 7th inning stretch. We've got it right here on Tall Tales. We're going to take that break right now and go to our 7th inning stretch, and we'll be right back with more Tall Tales.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
What is wrong with the National Football League, and why can't they get the basic stuff figured out? I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, I'll present a side to this you might not have thought of.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services on The Ray Gibson Show on 93.3 The Point.
Are you not getting paid what you're worth? Or not reaching your full potential at your job? If you're pioneering, adventurous, competitive, love talking to people, and want to earn $100,000 per year, sell cars on U.S. military bases with Military Auto Source. Start on Guam, stay on Guam, or move to Japan or Korea. To see if you qualify, visit maseastasiarecruiting.com. Military Auto Source, helping you reach your full potential.
That's what we all look forward to, is that at the end of the seventh inning stretch, the first batter up just cold cocks it right out over the wall and into the stands over the in the left field. I once saw Dave Winfield. If you ever remember, Dave Winfield played for the New York Yankees. I saw him in a game with the Baltimore Orioles run back, run to the wall, jump up, put his hand on top of the wall, spin himself around, extend his other hand, and catch the ball out of the hands of a person in the third row and come back down on the field. And when he landed, he took once. He didn't have to take any steps. The way he landed and threw in one motion. And threw to third and held the runners. And we were stunned, but the whole stadium stood and applauded. Even though it was against our team, it was one of those once-in-a-lifetime plays that when you see it, you know you're in the presence of a creation of God. It was masterful, and I'll bet that we have that kind of talent right here on Guam. We just don't know it. We just haven't given people a chance to show what they can do. I kind of thought that we might have this kind of genius inside the government of Guam, and every time there's a article in the paper about new appointments to the cabinet or staff, that genius will be revealed. Isn't that what you expect? When you pick up the newspaper and turn on the news and hear the announcements, you know, we really expect more. Like Senator James Moylan's campaign slogan, expect more. We do expect more. Do we get more? Or do we get same old, same old? You know, I'm still optimistic. I remain optimistic. I'm not writing anyone off. I have my expectations, but I am optimistic. I even told the speaker this the other day when I ran into her at Home Depot. I remain optimistic. But I certainly am not changing the way that I assess, the way I see what's going on. See, Ryan St. Nicholas pops up. He says, hey, Daryl, question on the H-2s. Why can't we look at the other countries that are not on the list for H-2 visa, that are not excluded? There are 80 countries. And we can. Thank you very much, Ryan. We can go to the other countries. But there's a thing going on. There's a thing going on. Companies on Guam that have been hiring Filipino workers for decades. They got this thing going. And I've worked with H-2 workers. I've worked private sector construction side by side with other subcontractors, the workers who are here on H-2 program, and we've talked about their situation and the work they do and their skill levels and whatnot. I appreciate them, and I appreciate them as people, and I'm glad that they're here working. It's good for them. It's good for their families. It's good for the companies. It's good for the project. It's good all the way around. But when you have fraud rates that are documented, and because of confidentiality, they're not going to give you the list of who scammed what. But the feds just got sick and tired of it. And all we had to do was keep it clean. And despite the warning cries, the warnings that were posted by the pronouncements of our current president of the United States and the directions he was giving to Homeland Security about immigrants and U.S. jobs, we didn't listen. We didn't tighten up our act at the last minute. We've had a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 40 years, and we haven't. We've just enjoyed it. Wow. Yeah, Jack Haddock says, root for the Tall Tales Tigers. Yay. That's my team now. Yeah. I'm always true to my Orioles. It doesn't matter if they're at the bottom of the AL East. It's a disappointment, but it's not a reason to change my stripes. I don't even use the new logo. I still use the old logo. And my Redskins. Doesn't matter if they just, run out of gas at, 10 games into the season. It's just, you gotta be true. And so, we were going to talk about bills. Let's see, bill number 11. I was just talking about this. James Moylan, an act to create the Expect More Act of 2019 by adding Section 3133 to Chapter 3, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to the creation of an agency customer service policy. Did you know about this? Did you know that Senator Moylan is now proposing that, well, let me go ahead and I'll just read this to you, that the director or equivalent officer of each agency and instrumentality of the government of Guam shall create a customer service policy catered to that respective public entity. The initial customer service policy shall be established and ratified by April 1st, with copies transmitted to the governor and speaker, no later than 5 working days after following the ratification thereof. Each plan shall be reviewed annually for adequacy and so ratified by the governing board, or in the absence of governing board, the governor, on or before October 1st with amendments. And copies of each plan, annually reviewed, will be transmitted to the governor and speaker no later than 5 days following the ratification. Such plans, it's kind of circular there, but I'm sure it'll get cleaned up. Such plans shall include, but not be limited to, provisions for the agency's core mission or policy statement, the agency's commitment towards customer service and how it will establish improvement in its delivery of such service, The agency's communication plan related to its protocol and response times for its customers. The agency's business plan relating to employee training for customer service. The agency's commitment towards professionalism, demeanor, decorum, and dress codes. Identifying who the customers of the agency are. The agency's plan of action in terms of reducing wait times for its customers. The agency's plan of action to improve efficiency through technology as it relates to the service they provide their customers. The agency's plan of action in terms of discipline with those employees who fail to adhere towards customer service policies. And 10, the agency's policy related to the employee's communication on social media. And so, each agency shall display their approved customer service policy in a spot visible at the entrance or lobby of their entity or entities. Now, Senator Moylan proposes to tack this on the end of the Title V GCA on Government Operations, Chapter 3, Departments of the Government. But Chapter 3, Departments of the Government are only line agencies, not the autonomous agencies. They're in a different section of the law, of the Guam Code. So this would only apply to line agencies by the proposal, if it gets passed. It wouldn't apply to GPA, the port. And already at the tail end of this chapter 3, are you see the move to the front of the line, better customer service policy is Section 3131. You know, when you go to a government agency and they say, if you're 55 or older or have disabilities, move to the front of the line. That law is already there it's Section 3131. And there's also a section here on annual public hearings requirements on fee schedules. That was passed back in 2007. How many of these have you heard about? All departments and agencies of the government of Guam that administer and collect fees for government services shall conduct a public hearing on existing fee schedules to receive and ascertain public opinion thereon within 60 days of enactment of this act. Beginning in 2008, all such departments and agencies shall conduct such hearings on an annual basis prior to April 1st of each year, and shall regularly adjust existing fees pursuant to the Administrative Adjudication Act or implement new fees for the purpose of cost recovery. Anybody hear about this happening? Anybody? Raise your hand. I can't remember a single one. But there's a law. It was 29-002. Must have been it looks like a supplemental budget bill after May of 2007. May 18, 2007. Wow. There's so many laws. What else? Also, there's the adjacent current law that would be adjacent that this Expect More Act of 2019 would be placed next to is Agency Operational Continuity Plans. Continuity of government. In case of a disruption, loss of personnel by retirement, National Guard deployment, breakdown of equipment necessary for the efficient provision of services, loss of physical or electronic records necessary for the efficient provision of services, unavailability of a facility necessary for the efficient provision of services, unanticipated reduced funding levels during the fiscal year relative to the appropriated level by 10%, 20%, or 30%. In February of not even a year ago, this was added, that agencies would have operational continuity plans. It is law. Do you know about any of those being implemented? Any combination of the above through reasonably foreseeable instances, such as a natural or other disaster or act. Any additional areas identified by the governing board or the governor. The maintenance of maximum operational continuity in the event of any situation that would disrupt the ability of the agency to operate. And a statement of actions to be taken to prevent or mitigate any vulnerabilities. I love the words. But you got to have people in the agencies who are skilled to implement the law. And even Senator Moylan's proposal to look at the mission statement. Mission statement is important. The enabling legislation is important. But the laws of the land, all of these laws that are in Guam Code annotated, until you're a director of an agency, you don't have any idea how many different laws there are that you have to follow. And one of the ways to simplify the following of laws is simply ignore the laws that your boss, the governor, didn't tell you to prioritize. Many, many, many bills are being proposed that don't necessarily improve the government. Which ones do? Which ones do? That's one of the reasons why I wanted to have Bill watch. Expect more Act of 2019. In my opinion, on an initial reading, my first reading, this is the first reading of Bill number 11 here on Tall Tales. On this first reading, I would say I like Senator Moylan's sentiment. This sounds like something that doesn't take a law. It sounds like something that the Leon Guerrero administration should be imposing on its directors as a matter of quality of their service. It should be an administrative and not a legislated priority. But I like the bill. It sort of articulates and reminds us what it is that our agencies should, or our directors, those unclassified appointees, how they should be approaching their jobs at the agencies that don't change from year to year. Okay, and then let me see if I can get started on this other one, which was really interesting. Bill number 15-35, and this is, of course, the first reading on Bill Watch. Joseph Augustine, the sole author of this bill, an act to amend Section 8, Chapter 11 of Public Law 34-116. Wow, that was just like 3 months ago, wasn't it? And to appropriate $298,000, about $300,000 from the general fund to the Guam Election Commission related to the 2018 primary and general elections. And it says appropriation to the Guam Election Commission for the sole purpose of paying expenditures related to the 2018 primary and general elections. $109,650,000 is authorized from the appropriation to pay prior year obligations of the Guam Election Commission for 2018 primary election expenditures. What, $110,000 more? How is it that the Guam Election Commission can spend $110,000 more than it's authorized or appropriated to spend? How can that happen? Just do it, and we'll find the money later, and we'll take it out of this year's money, the money that we were supposed to use this year to deal with problems this year, to make up for problems last year when they were not authorized to spend that money. They were supposed to do with the money that they were given. Aye. And this money was taken from someplace. It was taken from the Guam Retirement Security Plan. You remember the other day I was talking about Senator Taitagui's bill. Same source. So the Guam legislature, 34th legislature, appropriated for this year $500,000 to a retirement plan that didn't actually need the money. $500,000. I'm not impressed. And now we're going to give it to Guam Election Commission for a function that favored the political parties because they couldn't make up their minds on who they wanted to put as their candidate on the general election ballot. Let's take a break here. Love the music, Real Joe. We'll come back in just a few minutes with more to wrap up the Tall Tales.
Cheers to 80 years. It's our 80th anniversary and the gifts are on us. 80 gift certificates, 8 shopping sprees, 8 staycations, and 1 round-trip flyaway for 2 to Manila. So how do you enter? Calvo's Insurance personal home and auto customers are automatically entered. Non-Calvo's customers may enter by receiving a qualified quote. It's our way of saying thank you for trusting us for the past 80 years. For more details, visit calvos.com/giveaway or call 472-6816. Calvo's Insurance, serving Guam for 80 years.
Introducing Exchanged, Guam's first online and mobile remittance to the Philippines. Exchanged is the easiest and fastest way to send money to your family and friends anywhere in the Philippines. Download the Exchanged app or visit their website, exchange.me. Sign up, remit, and get a chance to win a trip for 2 to Manila. Deluxe accommodations at the Belmont Hotel at Resorts World Manila. So sign up and remit now at Exchanged. Promo ends March 2nd, 2019. Conditions apply. Also avail of Exchange dollar to remit promo. Visit exchange.me for details.
All right. And we're here for the final roundup here. And approaching 6 o'clock here. It's 10 minutes to 6, 9 minutes to 6. And so we're finishing up Tall Tales for Thursday, January 24th. Now, you've heard this saying, no news is good news. And I think I'd like nothing better than to have some good news that I could talk about here on Tall Tales. And not problems. I'd love to hear about how things are going swimmingly well here and there. Because we need some of that good news. Instead of gnashing of teeth and wailing and wringing our hands and tearing our clothes in anguish again over things that are just not happening the way that we expect them to happen. We know better. And we elect people who are supposed to represent our interests and make things better. Anyone want to call in last minute? Please do. 888-8255. There was an article in the paper was it today? Yesterday? I didn't put the date. Oh, today. Tumon Bay power lines going underground. The Consolidated Commission on Utilities on Tuesday night authorized a $5.2 million project to move overhead power lines underground. Power lines along Pale San Vitores Road will be hidden from view in an underground system. The project will also upgrade the existing system to improve power quality. John Beneventi, the GPA General Manager, said this project will provide an underground system that will remain intact in the event of a typhoon, consequently improving restoration efforts for this area. The project will install primary and secondary underground systems to 5 sites along Pale San Vitores Road in Tumon, including at Fiesta Resort Guam, Daiichi Condo site, behind Pacific Bay Hotel, behind DFS towards the Loti Hotel, and areas near Nico Hotel. The primary distribution lines will be placed underground for residential and commercial customers within the project area. GPA borrowed bond money to fund the project. And the project was awarded to the lowest bidder, Cortec, according to John Beneventi. And of course, Cortec is an affiliate of the Guam Daily Post. Beneventi concluded his statements by saying Tumon is the center of Guam's tourism industry, and thus improving service reliability to Tumon will greatly benefit the people of Guam and significantly aid with recovery efforts after typhoons. Now, this makes a lot of sense, since the power poles are so ugly, and tourism being a economic engine of our, of the economy, We should make our island look picture perfect. And $5.2 million taken out of the rates that we pay, that's not a bad deal. And make Tumon look really nice. I wonder if they're going to have to dig the trenches using a backhoe, or they're going to use the underground, that like a conduit route digger that never surfaces, is a tunnel borer. It'd be interesting to find out. And also how they're going to get around the problem of the low areas where the water pools. I don't know if those lines would do really well sitting in water all the time. And but these are the kinds of stories that I'd like to see heads up action by public officials. Say, yeah, we're going to do something right here. We could do it every place, but they just say, let's put a power pole in. Yeah, Gary Schoenhals says, as they leave the rest of the island to fall apart. Well, down in Tumon, there's lots of generators. And so if something goes wrong with the system, like I know the underground system up in Sinahanya, when it goes belly up, it takes a while to fix. It's faster to fix the overhead lines. But, I think also they have to think about the reliability of a system after typhoons in terms of risk management for insurance policies, because FEMA is just tired of replacing our infrastructure, public infrastructure. We've gone through this over in the 90s, and FEMA's, it's a different FEMA now. They don't want to have to do this over and over again. So, but thank you, Gary, for your comment. And so, this is the kind of thing. I'll be looking for some good news coming out of any of the news organizations. Anything that you guys are talking about, you find out that there's something good going on, love to hear it. I'd love to hear it. I hate hearing about things like, let's send 10 people to Washington, D.C. and go knock on doors and ask them to please understand that we need cockfighting on Guam for our culture to survive. That is just absolutely... Can you think of how much we could take? When it happens, we'll add up all the money that they spent, the travel money and the per diem, and we'll ask, what could that money have been used for here on Guam that they decided was a lower priority? Set it aside for the Liberation Parade or something. I don't know. It's interesting living here. I love living here, even with the problems. And I wish we didn't have these problems and we wouldn't have to have a show like Tall Tales. That'd be fine with me. We could just all live in paradise and smile. But I'm sure we're going to have something to talk about tomorrow, so do tune in. Tune in to Ray Gibson tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock on The Point from 6 until 10. And, of course, Guam's favorite off-island talk show host, Rush Limbaugh, coming on at 1 o'clock right here on this station. And yours truly, I'll be back 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon for more Tall Tales, sitting in for Bob Klitzkie. I'm Darrell Taggery. Thank you very much for tuning in and for joining me this afternoon.